Well, it looks like I've become a YouTube gamer. GeoGuessr a couple of weeks ago, and now a Sudoku. Perhaps not your stereotypical YouTube gaming content, but nevertheless, I think it's cool. Anyway, this is a Sudoku that I made a few months ago, and I sent it into Cracking the Cryptic. If you don't know what Cracking the Cryptic is, it's a YouTube channel. I'll make sure I put a link in the description below. It's a fantastic channel. They post a Sudoku solve, two Sudoku solves every day with a link where you can play along yourself as well. And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say it really helped me through all of the lockdowns we've had in the last couple of years, particularly because I didn't get to see my family in person. But having an excuse to video call them and solve a Sudoku together was absolutely wonderful. So huge thanks and shout out to Cracking the Cryptic for that. And I'm not just saying that because I intend to send this video to Cracking the Cryptic for them potentially, well, for one of them potentially to watch, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now, I did actually have another Sudoku that I made featured on their channel a couple of months before I made this Sudoku. So I was kind of on a buzz, on a high from that, because that was really exciting. Thank you so much if you are watching this for featuring that, the Killer Cat Sudoku, which was good fun and a really good solve by Mark Goodliff, one of the presenters. The other one is Simon Anthony. Shout out to him as well. Anyway, I thought, why not? I'll try and get a second Sudoku featured on the channel. So I sent in this puzzle in an email, and it didn't get featured on the channel. No hard feelings. I expect what happened is they found it impossible because actually there is a logical step near the beginning of this solve, and I don't want to give away too much. There is a logical step that basically requires bifurcation, which is when you basically guess a digit and then play out the Sudoku as if that's right until you're proven otherwise. It's not a particularly satisfying or legitimate solution method in the eyes of Sudoku solvers. So it's not a great puzzle in that regard. And I'll explain why I haven't changed it, why I still think it's worth considering. But yes, it wasn't featured on the channel because of that. So what I want to do in this video is play through the solution to this Sudoku, and when I get to the bit that requires a lot of bifurcation, I'll explain what bifurcation needs to be done, and then I will suggest an extra clue that I think can be put into this grid that will get rid of some of that bifurcation. This is still a unique and just about humanly solvable Sudoku once you know the rules, which I'll explain in a moment. I think it could do with having some of that bifurcation skipped out, which unfortunately means having a clue in here that isn't a green circle. So I've left it as only green circles because aesthetically it looks really cool. But no, I do think we could add in an extra clue that just helps out a little bit with that early stage of it. So my plan is that one of the two hosts of Cracking the Cryptic watches this video and expresses some kind of an opinion on whether that extra clue is required, and if so, I would love for the other host to have a go at it with that clue programmed in when it's presented to them, potentially. If not, I completely understand there's no expectation. I'm sure they're absolutely inundated with emails from fans all the time and suggestions for which Sudoku to tackle next. So yes, no expectations, but I do think it's quite an interesting Sudoku. As far as I'm aware, it's a unique and original rule set. I expect it probably isn't, but I haven't yet seen this rule set being used elsewhere. And I certainly think it's cool that there is a unique and humanly solvable solution to this puzzle with no digits, no clues except for these green circles. So let's have a look at these rules, and in order to do that I'm going to click that button. The timer is going to start, but given that I made this puzzle, I'm not considering this a time attack challenge or anything like that. I know the solution, and I will just be talking through it, basically. So, here are the rules down here. A cell marked with a green circle contains a digit that describes how many of its neighbours, orthogonal and diagonal, are of the opposite parity to it. That's a bit of a convoluted rule, but let's do an example. For example, if a marked cell contains a 3, it is surrounded by exactly 3 even digits. Why even? Well, because 3 is odd, and the opposite of odd is even, so we want exactly 3 even digits in the neighbours, both orthogonal and diagonal. Those 8 squares contain exactly 3 even digits, if that 3 is a correct digit. Alternatively, if a marked cell is, if it contains a 6, it is surrounded by exactly 6 odd digits. Why odd? Because 6 is even, so the opposite of even is odd, so we want 6 odd digits in the neighbouring cells. Good, just to confirm, cells on an edge only have 5 neighbours. That seems kind of obvious, but sometimes you get Sudokus that loop round the side and kind of go off to the other edge of the grid. This is not one of those Sudokus, so that cell has 5 neighbours in total. And the last thing to say is this bottom bit: all cells fitting this property have been marked, i.e. the negative constraint applies. So for example, if I put a 4 in here, that means we could not fill these 8 neighbouring cells in with exactly 4 odd digits, because if we did, then that cell would have had to have been marked with a green circle. But the fact that it isn't tells us that that cell does not fit the property of being able to be marked with a green circle. And with that is all the rules. And I'm telling you that this contains a unique solution, which I find quite cool. Aesthetically, given that there's no other clues, I think that's quite cool. So, I will put a link in the description below for you to have a go at this puzzle if you want to, but I do strongly recommend that you watch at least the first bit of it first, because, like I said, there is a step fairly early on that you just won't really spot with kind of normal logical reasoning in a reasonable way. So I'll talk through the first bit, and I will make it very clear when we've reached that stage, because beyond that stage, once you've got past that initial kind of bifurcation stage, I think the rest of the puzzle is actually quite easy to solve. There isn't one single solution path. There's all sorts of stuff you can do at any given time to progress the solution, and I won't be showing everything that can possibly be done. I'll just be showing one possible solution path. But yeah, I think it really is quite manageable and tolerable after this first step. So do have a go if you like, but like I said, do stay tuned for the first few minutes. So, as they say on Cracking the Cryptic, let's get cracking. And the first thing that you would probably have your eyes drawn to is these columns here. Now, if you think about a green circle, you know that you can never put a 9 in it, because a 9, according to the rules, suggests that it has exactly 9 even neighbours. Well, it only has 8 neighbours, so it can't possibly be 9. We can't possibly fit 9 neighbours. So in this, we can't possibly fit 9 even neighbours because we can't fit 9 neighbours. So in this column, the 9 must go there and there or there. And in this column, the 9 must go there or there. Now, that could be a tempting place to start as some kind of swordfish or X-wing, or I can't remember all of the technical terms, but sadly it is fruitless, and that is not the place to start. The place to start is on this bottom row, where we have 5 marked cells. Well, on an edge, we only have a maximum of 5 neighbours anyway. The corner only has 3 neighbours, so these cells can never be more than 5. In fact, they must be the digits 1 to 5. And that gives us all 5 of those digits, so the rest must be 6, 7, 8 and 9. So, At this point, we have to start asking ourselves, where does a 5 go on this bottom row? We know it goes in one of the green marked cells, so which marked cell does it go in? Can it go there? Well, a 5 in a marked cell suggests that we have 5 even neighbours in that cell, and we only have 3 neighbours in that cell, so that doesn't work. Can we put a 5 here? Well, let's have a think about that. It needs all 5 of its neighbours to be even. I'm going to use blue for even and red for odd consistently throughout this whole solve. But this is a problem because that gives 5 even digits in the box. And in a 3x3 box of the Sudoku, we only have 2, 4, 6 and 8 as our even digits. That's only 4 even digits, so we cannot have 5. So that does not work. Now let's try a 5 here. Well, that means that those are all even. That is, of course, odd. And these two cells, well, they're green marked cells. We know already that they are the digits 1 to 5. So these have to be 5 or less, and they have to be even. So they are 2 and 4. Can we put a 4 in either of these cells, though? And the answer is no, because a 4 suggests that we have the 4 has 4 odd neighbours. So far we've got 1 and we've got a space for 2 more. That's not enough, so a 4 cannot go there, and we find exactly the same thing over on that side. So that does not work. The 5 cannot go there. Let me get better at clicking and we can proceed. So now we have boiled down the 5 to 2 possible cells along this bottom row. It's either here or here. And it is at this point that we need to bifurcate, basically. So let's try it in here. We get all of these as even cells. This becomes odd. Obviously, 5 is an odd number. We've already proven that this cannot be a 4 because it doesn't have enough potential odd neighbours. So it must be a 2. It's the only even digit left between 1 and 4. Now, this cell cannot be a 1 because a 1 means it has 1 even neighbour. A 1 in a marked cell must have exactly 1 even neighbour, and it's already got 2. That's too many. And it also can't be 4 for the same reason. A 4 means 4 odd neighbours, but it's only got space for 3 as a maximum. So it can't be 1 or 4, so it must be 3. This only has 3 neighbours, so it can't be the 4, it must be the 1, and that just leaves 4 to go over there. So that is one possible way of filling out the bottom row. Let's just bank that up here. So I'm just kind of putting them in their equivalent columns up there. So there's nothing wrong with that solution so far that we can see. So that is one possible way of laying out those bottom 5 digits. Alternatively, we can have a 5 here. Now what does that mean? Well, we can fill in the even digits just here. We can make that odd, of course. And now we have to ask ourselves, where does the 2 go in this row? Well, if we put a 2 on an edge, what that means is it has exactly 2, let's make it even, 2 odd neighbours. That means when it's got 5 neighbours in total, that means the other 3 neighbours all have to be even. So we have 3 even neighbours in here somewhere. That's 3 even numbers in total, plus the 2 is another even digit, and another 5 even digits over here. That creates 9 even digits in those 2 rows. And that's too many because we have the digits 1 to 9 exactly twice each. So that's 2, 4, 6 and 8 exactly twice each. That's 8 even digits in total. So that does not work. So we can't put a 2 there. It must go in the corner instead. So that is even. We can say the same thing about the 3. If we put a 3 on an edge, it needs 3 even neighbours plus the 5 over here. That's all of the even digits taken up. And there is a way of doing that because 3 isn't itself an even digit. We can actually just squeeze it in between the 2 and the 4 to make sure that the 3 is kind of consuming the last 3 even digits in these 2 rows. So that becomes odd. That is even, and by process of elimination, that must be the 1, as being the only marked cell left in that bottom row. Now that 1 has finished, the 1 clue is satisfied because it's got 1 even neighbour, so the rest can all be odd. Now the 4 clue is satisfied because it's got 4 odd neighbours, so the last one can be even, and in fact that's all of our even digits for both rows completed, so the rest are all odd. And that's all fine so far. So both options, this 1, 3, 2, 5, 4 option and the 2, 3, 4, 1, 5 option, are both fine so far at the moment. And that's what I mean by a fairly unsatisfying start to this solve, because there's nothing immediately that we can see that means that either of these breaks. So we need to go further. We need to bifurcate even further, and the square that breaks it eventually is this square just here. So it's an odd digit that's on a marked cell. It can't be a 3 because there's already a 3 in the box. It can't be a 1 because, given that it's marked, it means that it has, well, if it was a 1, it would have exactly 1 even neighbour. Well, it's already got 2, so that doesn't work. Can it be a 7? No, because it's already got 2 even digits, even neighbours, and has a maximum of 3 more. So it can't be as many as 7. It has to be 5. That's the only option left, and that means that all of the remaining cells, neighbouring cells, must be even to satisfy this 5 clue. And finally, this version breaks because we have 5 even digits in one 3x3 box of the Sudoku, when we can only ever have a maximum of 4. So there is a lot of bifurcation to get to this stage, but I don't know, maybe it's a reasonable amount of bifurcation. I'm not really sure. I'd be interested to know anyone else's thoughts. If you have an opinion on, aesthetically speaking, how much bifurcation is an okay amount of bifurcation, I'd be very interested to hear. But I do think this is probably a little bit too much. So what I would do to skip that, and this is the clue that I would add if I did kind of publish this more widely, certainly if I sent this in again to Cracking the Cryptic, and if you are still watching, if you watched in the first place, again, thank you very much for tuning in, Simon and or Mark. What I would do to make this a little bit more solvable is put an inequality sign between these two squares, because obviously in this solution 5 is bigger than the 2, but in this solution the 4 is bigger than the 1. So if we have an inequality sign pointing at this cell here, i.e. saying that this cell is smaller than this cell, then we can skip out some of that extra bifurcation and get to the stage where we can just immediately recognise that this is the correct solution. There's still quite a lot of bifurcation required to get to that stage, because you're narrowing down the 5 to 2 possible places along the bottom row, and then you have to play out the rest of that bottom row to work out that with the 5 over here that puts a 4 and a 1 here, and with the 5 over here, obviously, well, the 5 is going to be bigger than a 1, 2, 3 or 4 in that solution. So there's still a little bit of bifurcation. Maybe it's still an unacceptable amount of bifurcation. I don't know. I'm not experienced with what counts as aesthetically pleasing, but I think there's some nice logic. Putting a 5 here, it does require some interesting logic to result in a 4 and a 1 going in these positions, and I'd quite like to keep that logic in the solution, but going any further than that I think is too much bifurcation. So that's what I would do, and if you have any other ideas of a clue that could resolve some of that bifurcation and avoid that awkward step, I'd be very interested to hear it. But otherwise, I will carry on with the rest of the solution. And like I said, I will make it clear when the rest of the solution becomes a lot more manageable and tolerable, and this is that point. So once we've got, what am I doing? Once we've got that this is the correct solution for the bottom row, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 5, 4, from this point onwards, I think the solution is much more manageable. So feel free to go into the description, click on the link, the F puzzles link, and have a go at solving the Sudoku yourself. Or if not, stay here and I will talk you through the solution. So, well, first of all, let's get rid of all of that. Don't need that anymore. These are all odd digits. I know, shocking. That's an even digit, that's an even digit. In fact, all of the digits around the 5 must be even. Now we've only got one neighbour left for this 2. We've already got both of its odd neighbours, so the last one can be even. And now the 3 and the 1 both have enough even neighbours, so that last one is odd. In fact, actually, we've already got all 4 even digits for this row, so the rest are all odd. This 4 must have 1 even and 1 odd. It's already got 3 odd, so it needs 1 more odd neighbour, and the remaining one will be even. That will be the last even in the row, so that last digit becomes odd. Okay, so now we can look at this digit. It's an even number, and it's so far got 2 odd neighbours. The maximum number of odd neighbours it can have is 5 if all 3 of those are odd, and the minimum is 2, but it can't be a 2 because there's already a 2 in the box. So it's between 2 and 5, and it's not 2, and it's even, so it's 4. That tells us that exactly 2 of those must be odd, and the last one will be even. Now we can look at this square. It's an even digit which has got 1 odd neighbour so far, and it can have a maximum of 4 odd neighbours if they're all odd, but it can't be 4 because a 4 is already taken in the row, so the only remaining option is 2. So we need 1 of these 3 digits to be odd, and the other 2 can be even. So then we get this pattern where 2 of those need to be even, but 2 of those need to be odd. And in order to make that work, we must have an odd there and an even there. Just to prove that, if we made this even, then in order to satisfy the 4, we'd need both of those to be odd, and that breaks the 2. And we can do exactly the same going the other way. If we make this odd, then to satisfy the 2, both of these need to be even, but that breaks the 4 because there isn't enough space for the 4th odd neighbour. So this must be even, and this must be odd, and that leaves us with 1 of each in these 2. Now, we have actually finished all 4 even digits in this 3x3 box, so the remaining 3 can all be odd, and in fact that tells us that that is the odd digit, so that one must be even, and that finishes off this box for us. The last digit in the box must be odd. Now, by normal Sudoku, we can put a 4 in this top row, and that's the only square that is even, so that must be the 4. That means this is 6 and 8, this is also 6 and 8. Now, what can this digit be? Well, it's an odd digit, so it's describing how many of its neighbours are even. It's already got 3 even neighbours, and it can have a maximum of 3 more. So it's a maximum of 6, and it's odd, and it's not 1 or 3. So by process of elimination, that is a 5. Let's have a look at this one. It's already got 5 even neighbours, and it's describing how many even neighbours it has. So it's a minimum of 5. We know a green marked cell can never be 9, so it's between 5 and 9, exclusive, and it's odd. So by process of elimination, it's a 7. Right, at this point we can do some clever stuff with this 4th row up, because this 5 requires a further 2 even digits. It needs to be surrounded by 5 even digits in total, and it's only got 3 so far, so 2 of those need to be even. This 4 has already got 3 out of its 4 odd neighbours, so only 1 more of those 3 must be odd, so the other 2 must be even. So we've got 2 evens in those 3 cells, 2 evens in those 3 cells, and that's all of the evens that we need for this row. So the remaining 3 must all be odd. Let's have a think about, in fact, let's have a think about this bottom row, because we've only got one cell left, so it must be even, and it must be 6 or 8. These two odd cells must be 7 or 9, but that 7 immediately resolves it for us. And in fact those two odd cells must be 7 or 9, but the 7 again immediately resolves it for us. This is a 1 and a 3. Let's have a think about this cell. It's an odd digit describing how many of its neighbours are even. It's so far got 2 and can have a maximum of 2 more. So it's a maximum of 4 and a minimum of 2, and it's odd, so it's 3. That resolves this for us. That also tells us that exactly one of those two digits must be even to finish off the 3. We've got another 2 evens there, so the fourth and final even in the box must go there. Right, now let's have a think about this cell. This one's a little bit complicated. What are the available options? Well, in fact, before I do that, let's put a 5 and a 9 in there because that completes the row. So in the box, in these 4 squares, we need a 1, 2, 6 and 8. Can it be a 2? Well, a 2 is describing a cell with 2 odd neighbours, and we've already got 6, so that's not going to work. So it can't be a 2. Can it be 6? Well, that would mean it's already finished, so the remaining 2 neighbours would both be even. But that creates a problem because 6 itself is an even digit, so if we make that even and then we make its neighbour even, that creates 5 evens in the box. So that does not work. We can take a 6 out, so it becomes 1 or 8. Now let's think about both of those options. If it's 8, then all of its neighbours become odd. Okay, and if it's a 1, well, that's the last odd digit in the box, so that becomes even. So that final neighbour, because the 1 then becomes satisfied, it's got its 1 even neighbour, that last one becomes odd. So in both of those combinations, that digit is odd. Now we can have a look at this 4 again, revisit this 4. It's now got all 4 of its odd neighbours, so those 2 become even. Now the 7 has got all 7 of its even neighbours, so that last one becomes odd. And now the 5 needs 2 more evens, and there are only 2 more spaces. So that is the 4th row up completed for us. Fantastic. Okay, where do we go next? Yes, this column, in fact. We've got 4 even numbers. We've got a 6 and an 8 and a 4, so the last one becomes 2. And then all of these digits become odd. Let's have a think about this cell. It's got 3 odd digits already, and it can have a maximum of 5 if both of those are odd. So it's between 3 and 5, and it's an even number, so it's 4. That means these are 6 and 8 in some order. Right, let's have a think about this digit. Is that the right digit to go for? I think it is. Yeah, okay. This digit definitely has exactly 1 even neighbour down here because because we know that one of these is even, one of these is odd. So it's got a maximum, a minimum of 1 and a maximum, if we make all of these odd, of 4. So it's between 1 and 4 inclusive, and it's odd, and it can't be 3 because there's a 3 in the column already, so we make it 1, and that actually resolves this. That becomes an 8, which is of course even, and that becomes the last odd in the box. In fact, we can do an awful lot of sorting out here. That becomes 6, that becomes 8, 6, 8, 6. That's a 1, it's the only odd square left, and that's a 2, and that 8 also resolves this, in fact. And now this 1 has got its 1 even neighbour, so the rest all become odd. This digit, in fact, yes, this digit is describing how many even neighbours it has. It's a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3, and it's odd, so it must be 3, which tells us that is even. In fact, actually, the rest of this box must all be even because we've already got the 5 odds. We also already have the 5 odds in this column, so these must all be even. That means we already have we've finished the 4 evens for this row, so all of these become odd. Making really good progress here. We've now finished all of the odds for this box, so that becomes even. This cell can't be 6, 4, 2 or 8, so it is odd, and that means the remaining 2 cells in the box, or row, however you want to think of it, are even. So that's an awful lot of colouring that we've just whizzed through. Let's assess the damage. Well, this is a 2, 4 pair, but we can immediately write a 2 in here because it has 2 odd neighbours. That becomes a 4 then. This, well, we can just write it in. It's an even digit describing how many of its neighbours are odd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6. Nice and easy. Now, where do we go from here? Well, this is a 5, 7 because it's all that's left in the column. This is 5, 7 and 9 because it's all of the odd digits left in the box, but that's not a 7, which means a 7 definitely does go in one of those two, so it can't go here. So that's a 5, that's a 7, that takes 5s out of here, so that becomes a 5, that resolves that down here, and we just have this 7, 9 pair left over here. These become 1 and 3, that's a 9, that's the only odd digit left in the row. Yeah, let's go with that, the row. Okay, and it's at this point that I would finally look at the top row of the Sudoku. So far, the whole solution has basically been kind of crawling up gradually from the bottom of the Sudoku upwards. But I'm going to finally look at this top row and put in some candidates. Well, we know they're all 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This corner one, in fact, can't be a 4 or 5 because it only has 3 neighbours. Okay, so let's have a look down the column. This can't be 2, 4 or 5. This can't be 1, 3 or 4. This can't be 1, 3 or 5. And this can't be 2. So we now have a 1, 3 pair. In fact, we can colour those in because they're definitely odd now. That's definitely even. Now, this cell, can it be a 3? And the answer is no, because a 3 would mean all 3 of those would have to be even to satisfy the clue, and putting 2 even digits here means that this column has 5 even digits in total. That is too many, so that cannot be a 3. So that's a 1, that means that's a 3. Now all 3 of these neighbours must be even, and we know that we can't put a 4 in here because there's only 3 spaces for potential odds, so that becomes a 2, that makes that a 5. That means that all 5 of the 5's neighbours are even. The 5 itself is odd, and in fact we've completed the even digits for this box, so these all become odd. We've completed the even digits for this row, so these all become odd. We've completed the odd digits for this box, so that becomes even. And we just need 2 more evens in here and 2 more evens in here, and then we'll be finished. So let's just do a few more numbers instead of painting. This digit here, we can just write it in. It's an odd digit describing how many of its its neighbours are even, and there are 7. So that's a 7. That resolves the 7, 9 down here. This is now a 1, 9 pair, which we can resolve straight away. This is 4, 6 and 8, but the 4 and the 8 here tell us that that's a 6, so this is 4 and 8. That means that the 2 only has 1 even space left in the row. Okay, so where do we go now? That's a 2 because we've got a 2 there and there, so this is 4, 6, 8. In fact, actually, the 2, 4 and 6 here tell us that that's an 8, so that takes 8s out of there. Puts an 8 there, that resolves the 8, 4 here, and that resolves the 4, 6 there. So now we have a 4 and a 6 left in that column. That becomes an 8, which tells us that those are all odd. Now, in order to resolve this row, we need both of those to be even. In order to resolve this column, we need that to be even. We've got the 4 evens for this column, so that's odd. And that is even, and we've finished painting the grid. So now it's just a case of filling the numbers in. The 6, 4 and 2 here tell us that that's 8. Oh, we can write in this digit straight away. It's an even digit describing how many of its neighbours are odd, so it's a 4. That makes that a 6 and that a 4. That means that's a 2, that's a 6. And we've finished the even half of the Sudoku. So let's just work out what's left. So in this row, we have a 3 and a 5. In this column, we have a 3 and a 9. In this column, we have a 3 and a 5. What else can we say? In this row, we have a 7 and a 9. We have we have X-wings on 3s here. And what that means is that if we place a 3 here, then we must place a 3 here. And if we place a 3 here, then we must place a 3 here, because of the column logic. And that means that none of these cells can be 3s. So let's just think about what they can be. 1, not 3, 5, 7 or 9. Let's take a 1 out of here, a 5 and a 7 out of here, 9's out of here, a 5 out of here, a 9 out of here, a 5 out of here, and that appears to be all we can do. That's it, we're stuck. Except there is one more rule that we haven't considered yet. All cells fitting this property have been marked, i.e. the negative constraint applies. Now, before I reveal the final solution, I'm going to talk a little bit about the negative constraint and aesthetically whether it's a good thing or not. And hopefully by rambling a little bit, I'll give you an opportunity to try and find where the negative constraint applies. But yes, I made this puzzle and I got to this stage. I kind of designed it by kind of solving it as I designed it. And I got to this stage and there was nothing left that I could see that I could do. And I was really sad actually that I'd got this far with a completely kind of blank grid other than these green circles. I'd got so close, but we'd come up with a deadly pattern at the end. And I was so upset. But then I spotted this place where the negative constraint applies, and I was delighted that there was going to end up being a unique solution. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. So I actually really like the negative constraint, and actually generally speaking, I like having the negative constraint. It means that all of the clues that can be given have been given, and there's something very kind of satisfying about knowing that all possible clues have been given on the grid. So I quite like it, but I did run this puzzle past my dad. Shout out to my dad, he's brilliant at puzzles, not just Sudokus, chess problems as well. He's very, very clever with all of this kind of thing. And he says that certainly in the chess problem world, having the negative constraint would be considered a little bit kind of ugly because it's like an extra rule. You know, so far it's a very pure Sudoku because it's only relied on one type of rule, one rule, and it's almost like having the negative constraint is adding an extra rule. It's a very closely related rule to obviously the green marked cells rule, but it's like having an extra rule, so it just kind of makes the solve a little bit less satisfying from that point of view. And that's actually why I'm so reluctant to put this inequality sign right here at the start of the solve, because it's an extra rule. It makes the Sudoku a little bit less pure. So I don't know, it's a subjective thing really about what counts as an aesthetically pleasing Sudoku. I don't know, but personally I actually really like the negative constraint, and I even like it when it's only used as a bit of a disambiguator right at the end of a puzzle, like it is here, because it gives you an opportunity to forget that the negative constraint applies, and then you have this eureka moment right at the end. You're stuck with this deadly pattern, and then suddenly you remember, oh yeah, the negative constraint applies, and you start looking for that. I really enjoy that moment in a solve. So yeah, personally, from a subjective point of view, I like it, but I know that it's not to everyone's taste. What I will say is that you can actually use the negative constraint at earlier points in the solution. Like I said right at the start, this is not kind of one single solution path. Once you've got those original 5 numbers, that 1, 3, 2, 5, 4, in the bottom row, you can take all sorts of paths to reach your final solution. I showed one that was relatively quick, but there's all sorts you can do, including using the negative constraint to rule out certain candidates for possible cells. So it can be useful if you want to use it earlier on in the solve, but it's not required up until this stage. Right, what you're possibly thinking is, well, hang on a minute. Surely you can just eliminate the negative constraint by putting a green marked circle on the cell in question. Well, let's do that. If you haven't spotted the cell in question yet, and you want to, then pause the video now, because I'm about to reveal it. It is this cell just here. This cell, if it was a 3, would fit the property of having a green marked circle, so it should have had been marked, but the fact that it isn't tells us that it can't be a 3, so it must be a 5 in our final solution. But let's imagine for a moment that I had put a green marked circle in there, because clearly that works. We can just put a 3 in there and say that that's a marked cell. Okay, so let's resolve this solution. That gives a 5 here, that puts a 9 there, and a 3 there, and a 1 there, and a 3 there, and a 9 here, and a 7 here, and a 5, and a 3, and a 9, takes a 9 out of there, takes a 5 out of there, and oh dear, we're left with another deadly pattern, because putting a 1 here and here, and a 7 there and there, is just as valid a solution as putting a 7 there and there, and a 1 there and there. So we're left with this deadly pattern. It can't be resolved. It's a cooked pair of solutions that way round. And yet somehow, if we swap the 5 and the 3 around, we use the negative constraint and say that that can't be a 3, it's a 5 instead. Let's see where that ends up. Resolving all of this, that becomes 7, that becomes 5, that's a 9, that's a 1, that's 3, what am I missing? That's a 7, 9 pair, hang on, oh that's a 9, and that's a 7, that's a 9, this becomes a 1, and that's a 7, and we've solved the Sudoku. So somehow, by having a 5 here, there is one unique solution, and by having a 3 there, it ends up cooking. We end up with a deadly pattern. So I find that really interesting. I don't know. It's maybe it's not interesting, but I think it's cool, and I think it's a really neat way of finishing off the Sudoku. It means that there's variety and challenge right up until the last logical step. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with this Sudoku, and I quite like that it's got the negative constraint. Like I said, I think it does require this inequality sign just here to skip out some but not all of the bifurcation. I quite like some of the bifurcation staying in there, because there is some quite cool logic in terms of putting a 5 there and deducing what can go in the rest of the row. In fact, I think it's some of the most challenging logic in the whole puzzle, so I think it would be nice to keep that. But yeah, I understand it's quite a bit of bifurcation, so it's an aesthetic thing, isn't it? It's subjective. Anyway, that wraps up this solution video. If you have watched all the way to the end, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm hugely grateful. I would say like and subscribe for more similar content, but given that I posted some GeoGuessr a couple of weeks ago, and I'm meant to be a music channel, and I also posted a cycle lane rant a couple of years ago as well, who knows what content you'll be in for. But do subscribe if you'd like to. That would be much appreciated. Thanks again for watching this video. Do let me know what you think. Let me know if you had a go at the puzzle yourself and how you found it. Whether you think the disambiguator at the bottom is required, whether you think actually there should be more of a disambiguator. Maybe I should just give a digit straight away, like this 1 for example, to help the solver make a start. I think that would be too much of a clue, but let me know what you think. Thank you very much again for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you next time.